Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a talk about the topic of listening in communication. My name is Brian Weaver, and I am Assistant Professor of Communication and Faculty Advisor to Phi Theta Kappa at the Community College of Denver. I am thrilled and honored to welcome and interview Mr. Andreas Braun today. Mr. Braun is Denver's first international honorary inductee and second-year scholar and artist in residence. He first resides in Cologne, North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany, a country known as one of thinkers and poets. Mr. Braun is a multilingual philosopher, scholar, writer, multimedia artist, and world explorer. He's experienced at least 40 countries over the last 10 years, pursuing his passion for intercultural and all communication. Thank you and welcome, Mr. Braun, for leading scholarship with us, not only in the communication field, but also with our current research theme, the art and science of play, soul of play. Welcome.
Thank you so much for this introduction.
You're very welcome. And I think we will just get started with our first question.
Yes, all right.
Mr. Braun, one of the basic active listening tenets is to try to not be thinking about and formulating your own responses as someone else is communicating with you. So, do you feel that it's better to try to listen more fully, more attentively? And do you think that this idea is like a more basic skill, a kind of a basic practice or habit? Or do you think that this is more maybe about the listener's character, their relationship to their own ego per se? I guess simplified, is this an easy way of listening?
Probably both, and probably it's a very easy and a very impossible question, because it depends always on the listener and your conversational partner, because sometimes it depends on your mood. It depends on the type of conversation. Sometimes people just need to listen, and sometimes people just want to tell a story and they want you to listen because they want to talk about her or his problem, and they want to share, and they want that you listen and don't interrupt them. So it's sometimes very easy to just listen and let it go and let it come into your mind maybe and just evaluate it. And sometimes it's very difficult, because sometimes when it's maybe a deeper discussion, or maybe if it's an argument, and sometimes someone is telling you things that you don't understand maybe, or that are in your mind or in your own idea are not right. For example, if someone is telling me always that my shirt is red and I know my shirt is blue, then it could be a big problem in my inner mind, because always I'm thinking he's a liar, he's not telling the truth. Why is he doing this, and what is his purpose? And I want to understand this. I really want to understand this. And then in my inner mind, maybe your own story starts to tell me another truth. And this could be a problem, because I'm then distracted from my own narrative and from my own story. And it's complicated because I'm not focused on the other people and the other person. And so it's a kind of training, or maybe a thing of practicing, just to listen and let it be and enjoy this moment, to accept maybe a story. And sometimes there's no absolutely the truth in this blue or red one. Maybe it's a combination, maybe it's purple, and the other one can't accept this completely, or maybe can't explain it correctly. And so it's sometimes easier just to listen and try to understand and let it go to the end of the story, and then evaluate everything of this. So it's easy sometimes, just to let it be and just to listen. And sometimes it's a really big challenge. Yes.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that answer. And it's so thought-provoking to think about the idea of when we perceive someone to be wrong, especially, right? And what happens in our minds then.
Yes.
In the color example, becoming purple. I like that. Thank you.
Yes, and often I have inside me the will to stop this conversation or to stop this man or this woman telling some things. I want to interrupt him or her and to maybe argue about the right color. But maybe this is not the problem. The problem is something else, and we shouldn't be distracted from all of this different kind of things and stories.
Thank you. All right.
You're welcome.
For our second question, the topic of norms and normal. Mr. Braun, if you had to set norms, say in a group, or maybe even for a pair of people, for what you'd consider to be normal listening skills, what would be, say, 2 elements of listening that you might choose? And if you thought of 1 or 2 behaviors or strategies that you would qualify then as extraordinary, not necessarily so normal, but that would be more above and beyond in a listening experience, what would you choose as an example there? So, for example, I might say that using eye contact, for example, would be a good norm, but that maybe an intentional or thoughtful use of silence could be more extraordinary. What do you think?
In my opinion, there are maybe two very important things, I think. So, like you said, this eye contact or maybe positive language from your body. So an open body language, so eye contact and all of those things are very important to be open and to present and not to be distracted from too many other things. So this is in general always true, I think, but in my opinion, there's this most important topic for listening is for me the lack of disturbance, that you create an atmosphere of no disturbance. So if it is a really deep conversation, or if someone wants to tell you something very intense or maybe very important, you have to use maybe a room without distraction, without your cellular and maybe without a TV or maybe a telephone. And maybe it would be also good to tell someone else that you don't want to get disturbed, maybe by someone knocking on the door. It's always important. Always, I think it's always it's also a good point not to have maybe your cellular on the table, or just to be distracted by some things on your table or by a light or book or anything like this. So for a normal conversation, of course, if you have a telephone call, then it's in normal conversations, we are used to get distracted in our current time. We are doing in our current time so many things at the same time. It's so often when I maybe call a colleague and we are discussing about a new paper, then I'm listening or hearing she is texting to someone else, or maybe she's preparing something else. And I think it's not a nice way to communicate, because you have the emotion that this person is not present and not attentive. But this is maybe in normal life, it's maybe standard. So often when we are walking, we are texting, or we are answering a call, and that's completely okay if it's just to talk about an appointment or maybe to arrange something, then it's okay. But if it's about really interesting topic, then we shouldn't do that. In those moments, it's very important to be present and to listen. And another thing is that I would use this pauses and silence, like you mentioned before, because it fits to the question we had before, because I said it's often those moments when we just listen to an idea of someone. Why is someone telling me that this shirt is red or blue, or that he has a certain opinion about a topic? I think then it's really important just to understand, and that you have the time to understand things. It's often so it's a development of ideas, thoughts, maybe also education, also your ideas in life, maybe about your opinion and your political impact. So it's often very intense and very interesting just to listen and to try to understand the opinion of someone else. And often we are forced in our inner mind to react and maybe to argue and maybe to fight against anything that we don't share or that we don't like. And that's totally and absolutely okay if we are in a discussion, and if we have only 15 minutes to discuss a topic, then it's absolutely okay to just react and immediately say our opinion. But I think if it's really a deep conversation, and if you want to listen to someone, and if you do want to understand his life and his fears, for example, and his dreams and his ideas of life, and maybe you want to get together with him and maybe develop an own new idea, or I don't know, maybe a new way of thinking about a certain topic, then I would suggest just to wait and just to pause and just to let his ideas come to you, and then make a pause. Don't react immediately. Don't want to argue about certain things. I think in those moments it's important to just to understand and to feel maybe, and let your emotion and your own thoughts and his thoughts or her thoughts come together. And I think in such an atmosphere, it's so much easier to discuss things and maybe to share things after this, because you tried to understand the other's opinion, and then it's so much easier, and also like a gift for the conversational partner, because he feels and he notices that you want to understand him. And this is very, very important, I think.
Yes. I definitely think so. That's a wonderful analogy, like a gift to the other one. And maybe we don't have so much time to talk it over now, but it would really be an interesting additional question or exploration to look into sort of the cultural norms and mores between different countries, different regions, different places on earth when it comes to what you're talking about with waiting and taking time and not just reacting immediately.
Yes, often I sense in other people just the will to answer directly, or just to to say their opinion, and I feel it in their eyes that they want to react and say that's wrong. I don't think so. They want to say it, and I can see that, and it's so important to just accept sometimes that I want to understand this maybe development of the other's opinion. Maybe it's after when I let the other people explain it, sometimes it might be easier to understand the whole development of thoughts when I just let it go and don't interrupt someone because I want to convince him about or her about my opinion.
Thank you very much.
Yes, of course, you're welcome.
All right, well, another question then that I think you'll also find connected is that in our current research guide, Mr. Braun, the art and science of play, and in our sub-theme, the soul of play, it's Professor Fritz, Dr. Kennedy Everett, and Dr. Ruckel musing about storytelling and our own inner voice. And they say it is human voice, yes, it is a human inner voice, but that it is inward. And with this storytelling, it's inwardly that we listen to what they call the voice of the story itself. The voice of the story itself. And so I wanted to ask you, when you think about listening to oneself and the stories told to us by our own inner voices, do you agree that this process would be both playful and even soulful? Do you think it fits together?
Oh yes, it fits together perfectly, and I think it's certainly so wonderful and so playful and soulful both, because maybe it depends on the different kind of people, but maybe I remember when I'm reading books, I'm always living in the story of a book, and I'm always reading it in my mind, and I'm thinking about the words, and I'm imagining maybe the landscape and the conversations and the certain figure of a person and of a character. And I like it so much, and I'm telling myself often those stories in my inner mind in a very loud voice. And maybe another example from, it's not long ago, I listened to a wonderful song, and this song was very intense, and it was about love and history, and a man reflecting and contemplating about life and kingdoms and love and certain communities and dependence on from people and our world. So the most important questions of our world and of human beings, and very intense and very sad, but also very optimistic, a combination. And I listened to it, I think, more than 10 times because I loved this song so much. And about through the harmonies of the songs, different kind of emotions unfolded in my mind. And I think it was an inspiration for maybe a next chapter of a short story I wanted to write. And yes, it was really an inspiration. I experienced this so many times before. Sometimes it's just an idea, or just sometimes I just observe anything in our world or in the street, and then it's an inspiration of a story that in my mind goes on and is developing to maybe a really interesting story. And so sometimes later I was listening to the harmonies in my mind, but typing on my keyboard on my laptop this kind of story. And I was listening then to my inner voice, and my inner voice was telling this story. And maybe through the memory of harmonies and maybe sentiments, it was really soulful and playful. Like you said before, I can really imagine this picture and this image, because I was telling myself a story, and I was enjoying the silence, because it was very silent in my room. But through the mood and through the development of the story, it was I got a lot of emotion, and the story went on in my imagination, and I wrote, and I enjoyed this kind of silence around me. But it was really like storytelling for myself. It was wonderful. So I can really imagine this kind of soulful and playful telling what you described. Yes.
That's wonderful. And I bet that a lot of the folks that are enjoying our interview right now could relate to that idea of inner voice with music and a song, and the way that you sort of situated that with this particular song, I think is really, beautiful.
Yes, and maybe one more thing, because sometimes we are also distracted from music and from the crowd and from people talking. And maybe some people are listening to the TV and to music and to other people and watching on their phone and on social media. And sometimes it's really exciting to just to listen to yourself, because sometimes we also have interesting stories to tell, but we have to listen and we have to start to listen. And there are really deep and interesting stories inside us, and we just have to begin to listen to ourselves. Try it.
Thank you. It's a great insight. I shall. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Braun, do you have time for one last question? Yeah?
Yes. Yeah. I would like it.
I've prepared one more for you, just in the case that you'd have a little extra time. So we'll shoot for this one more to conclude. I'd like to ask you, so curious, do you believe that we are in fact role driven in our listening experiences? The roles we play in life, are we role driven when we're listening? So that the manner in which that you would listen, say to your friend, maybe, is altogether formed by the role of friendship, say in comparison to a listening experience that you might have with your supervisor. What do you think?
Yes, of course. I think we are role driven, and I think sometimes it's absolutely understandable and good and helpful, because we have to use our roles and we have to live our certain kind of roles in our life. And so if a friend maybe comes to me and wants to have maybe my advice, or maybe just wanted to share about a problem or about an experience, then he wants me as a friend, and he wants me to listen, and maybe he wants me to just listen, or maybe he just wants me my advice. And this is completely okay, and it's different, of course, if I have a talk with my boss or supervisor, or maybe with my doctor. If I have a talk with my doctor, I want him in his role as a doctor, and I want his advice, and I don't want that he is not sure about maybe how he can treat me, because I want his advice, and it's his role and his job. And so in those kind of roles, it's really important. Also with my boss, sometimes in my work, I have certain responsibilities, and I have to decide certain things and to discuss them in other departments of my work. But if there's a problem, I want him to take his responsibility and to support me. And so I need him in his role. And so it's absolutely role driven, and that's also absolutely okay. But on the other hand, I think, is it always important to just live in our roles, or is it sometimes also important to maybe look beyond our roles and maybe to explore our own evaluation about things or ideas? For example, I can tell you a story about a colleague, and my colleague told me about a workshop she has to visit last week. It was a leadership workshop, and they were told to act in a certain kind of way if there's a problem with their colleagues or with their employees. For example, that they if someone of their employees have a problem, or maybe a personal problem, that they for example, that they don't that it's not allowed or not appropriate to touch other people, that it's not good to use certain kind of words, and that there are certain phrases they have to use. And with the first 1-2 sentence, I was surprised, but I said, yes, maybe that's okay, and that's helpful, and it's not always good to touch other people or strangers, and maybe that could be a problem. So it could be a good advice. But on the other hand, she continued and said that there were maybe a certain book with certain phrases to use in certain situations. And then I was shocked. I was really shocked because workshops and courses for leadership are always interesting and great, and we can all improve always our skills. And it's great to improve our skills because we can always learn and be better. And I love to improve myself and maybe my certain kind of skills. And every person has individual and maybe certain kind of skills that are maybe individual better for him or her or other people. But in my opinion, it's important to improve those skills, but not to adapt skills from a book and to maybe to become a machine. And this was in my understanding, it was very terrible because I don't want to have computers or machines around me and acting and listening and having a conversation with me. I want real people, and I want people with faults and with really great characters, or maybe people who have also certain things they can't do well. And we are all not perfect. And so it's completely okay to have things that I'm good in and others. But I think we have to improve and we have to learn, and we can use our conversations and our workshops to improve and to learn, but not to adapt a certain kind of way. Because, for example, when I come to my boss and I noticed he was just he just visited a workshop and is now practicing all of the skills he learned there, then something went so wrong, and then it's not honest. It's not his way of acting. And I noticed this first, and everyone can notice this, because it's not his soul and his mind and his ideas. And so I think it's important to learn and to be yourself and not another person you can't be. So this is just an example to what role-driven roles or conversations are sometimes helpful and great, because we have our expectations and we need security in certain relationships. So for those, they are really helpful and important. And it's also important to improve our skills, but we should use our personality and our individual characteristics to be a human being.
Of course. Wow. What a wonderful reminder and musing on role theory in general, a topic I've been so interested in for years. Really a beautiful treatment with wonderful examples. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Mr. Braun, this actually was just an exceptional experience. I want to thank you so much for sharing your time, your energy, and your thoughts with us this way and today. It was a true pleasure and privilege, and hopefully we will have the chance to do it again someday.
Yes, of course. It was my pleasure, and it was a privilege, and I liked it very much. Thank you.
Well, goodbye for now, Mr. Braun.
Goodbye.